You don't need magic to disappear for a while, because Firestone tires were built for ticking off mile markers. Firestone Destination LE3 tires. For 70,000 miles of exploring. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
John Quirk is a fourth-generation tire dealer with a storied history. His grandfather started in the tire industry, opening up Quirk Tire in Watertown, Massachusetts in 1926. Back then, the business grew with the advent of the Interstate Highway System and serviced mainly commercial and off-road tires. But as transportation evolved, so did the business. By 1985, John's father, Edward S. Quirk, retired, and in June of that year, John left the computer sales industry and returned home to Boston from Manhattan and took over the business as president and CEO. 2 weeks after 9/11, in September of 2001, Quirk Tire purchased VIP Discount Auto Centers, and the two firms were merged. John decided to keep the VIP name thanks to its tremendous brand recognition throughout New England, changing the name in 2004 to VIP Parts, Tire and Service, and again in 2012 to VIP Tires and Service when the parts division of VIP was sold to O'Reilly Auto Parts. Today, VIP Tire and Service operates 70 locations, with 50 of those co-occupied by both VIP Tires and Service and O'Reilly's Auto Part. And on March 1st, 2024, VIP opened its first store in Connecticut with the acquisition of Joe's Tire Shop in Waterbury, Connecticut. Welcome to Johnny G and Friends. I'm Johnny G, and on today's podcast, we're joined by John Quirk, Executive Chairman of VIP Tire and Service in beautiful Lewiston, Maine. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Johnny, how you doing?
Good to see you again, my friend. You're looking well.
Boy, I can't believe I'm on a podcast with the legend himself.
Well, appreciate that.
Somebody who's overseen and run as many stores as you have in your lengthy career is, I love hanging around with people like you because I can learn something and hope some of it rubs off on me.
Well, thank you so kindly. You know, I always would say somebody, even when I was at my highest position with Bridgestone, they would ask me, what was your toughest job? I said, my toughest job was not being president of Bridgestone. My toughest job was running a retail store, because that is, you've got the technicians. Back in my days, we used to call them mechanics, and they had their ways about them, they're a little touchy. And you had the customer coming in the store. I mean, you had to manage a complete operation, and that's a tough job. It really is.
Sure. Really is. And as you know, Johnny, when you're in the people business, when you're running all those stores, every person is a little bit different. And even though you try to get the culture and get them to row the boat in the same direction and open up the communication and, try to take in all their suggestions, at the end of the day, you still have to execute. And that's, what you put behind in all your years at Bridgestone, I'm sure, and trying to get the stores to emulate a good process so that the customers were well served.
Well, thank you so kindly for those kind words. So, John, your family has a fascinating history in the tire business. Can you tell my audience how your grandfather got started?
Sure. My grandfather grew up in Waltham, Massachusetts, which is about 20 miles west of Boston. And his father was in the meat business, literally horse-drawn wagon going door to door selling meat.
No kidding.
And the margins in it apparently weren't all that good. And of course, there's all kinds of, perishability in that product. And, right around that time was the, advent of the automobile. And my grandfather somehow got the idea that, the car was going to take off and that going into the replacement tire business could be a good thing. So his mother, my great-grandmother, loaned him $250 to start the business.
Wow.
Literally out of a cookie jar that she had hidden in the house. And he became at first selling used tires, and opened his first store in 1928 in Watertown, Massachusetts, which abuts Waltham. and he became a U.S. Royal dealer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he used to get his tires from railroad car from Akron, right across the street, and he had a 1,500 square foot shop that was jammed packed with inventory, and they changed all the tires outside on the sidewalk. Of course, it was dirt roads back then.
That's a great story. And those were
Yeah.
probably the real skinny tires too,
Yes,
huh?
the real skinny tires, and not many SKUs, Johnny.
Yeah, I know. Maybe about 3 or 4.
Right, right. And he loved meeting people and helping them. And he ran the business from 1928 through 1952 when my dad graduated from BC and got out of the Navy. And my grandfather retired then, and then my dad ran the business from 52 until 85. And our business primarily, uh, as the car developed through my grandfather's initiation of the business, there was a lot of infrastructure building going around in Boston. So he got involved in medium truck tires, and then that grew into the off-the-road business. And that really was the company's specialty for much of our heritage. We've been in business 98 years today, and most of that, I'd say up until we bought VIP, nearly 80% of our revenue was had something to do with an off-the-road tire. We had a fleet of tandem axle crane trucks that would go out in the field and change tires on road jobs, sand and gravel operations, quarry operations, scrap yards, kind of the dirtier the better, the heavier the better. Straddle carriers, the Port of Boston, where cargo ships came in, anywhere where they were using heavy equipment to move stuff around, we wanted to be there. And we then started to have our own vulcanizing shop so that we could do our own section repairs on giant tires. And there's a real art behind doing that successfully. And we had 3 or 4 guys that were, could really repair almost anything. And I could tell you a lot of stories about how we saved the day for a lot of people who had unique equipment where there wasn't a replacement tire available anywhere in the country. And we kept the tire in service so that it could still work. And literally go there at night, take it off, repair it, put it back on the next morning. And it was really something we were well known for. And then my dad got into the giant tire retread business. He was the first Bandag giant tire retreader in the country, in the world, I believe. And I know it was the country. And that was in Worcester, Massachusetts. And they were pumping out mainly 1,825 E3 earth mover tires for end dumps that were building highways in and around the Interstate Highway System in Boston. And they had problems keeping the rubber on, but when they did keep it on, it outwore a new tire handsomely. So our business was always built around service. We weren't the cheapest in town. We were Teamsters Local 25 for 65 years. So, all the federal highway projects that were going on, you had to be union to get on those jobs. We had really dedicated employees, 3 or 4 families where we had 3 generations, the father, the son, and the grandson working in our operation.
Wow. So didn't you work in the retread plant at one time?
I worked in not the giant tire retread plant. That was before I was a young boy at that time. But I worked at the Bandag truck tire plant in Watertown when I was 16, 17, during the summer, doing summer job.
That's a big job. That's a
big job, and it gets hot in the summertime, especially in there.
Oh my God. So I remember you telling me a story about your dad picking up the phone, and he said something like, "Do you want to buy my business?" and gave you like 24 hours to make a decision. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. My dad was my mom and dad. Unfortunately, my dad passed away about 8 years ago. My mom's still alive, 94, but my parents were were the nicest people. And my dad called me up and said, I was in New York and Manhattan selling computers. And he said that it was time and he wanted to retire. And he didn't ask if I wanted to buy the business. He said, do you want the business? And I said, Dad, you know I want the business. I was 26 years old and living in the city, which was pretty cool. And I said, yeah, give me a couple of years. And he goes, it was a Thursday. And I remember he said, well, you let me know on Monday. I said, what? And he goes, yeah, if you're not ready to make the move now, I'm going to have to do something else. And I'm like, all right, Dad. And sure enough, I thought about it over the weekend and I called and a few days later that week, I resigned and gave my 2-week notice and came back. And my parents had been so good to our family. We grew up in a large family. It was 5 boys and 1 girl, and they put us all through school. None of us had any debt. They were always there, went to every hockey game, football game, baseball game, and when we all got in trouble or needed help, they were always there for us. And, there was no way I was going to let him down.
Wow, that's a big change to leave the financial Manhattan clique town to leave and go into the tire business. That's a gutsy decision. You had to put your big boy pants on to make that decision.
Johnny, I can honestly say I remember driving home about, a month or 2 into the job, literally crying to myself going, what have I done?
Absolutely.
But, when I was working there as a kid, I remember coming home and saying, Dad, this isn't right. This isn't going right. He used to just say, you just do what Jackie tells you. Jackie was his general manager who was with him for over 40 years. And if he tells you to shut up, then shut up.
Well, good advice.
Good advice, right. But I always knew someday I would most likely have a shot at, being in a leadership position there. And none of my brothers wanted it. Our family's also in the golf business. At the time, we owned 2 golf courses. My parents have since sold one, and one was a private course which they sold. It was in Hingham, Massachusetts, called South Shore Country Club, which was a pretty nice Donald Ross golf course. And the second one is one that the family still owns and operates. It's in Wayland, called Wayland Country Club, which is a 18-hole public course. And my 2 brothers run that. And so, it all turned out great. And like any business, Johnny, you got to put your heart and soul into it. And let's face it, the tire business and the auto repair business is not a glamorous business by any means, but it can be very rewarding. And, we have a chance to really change our employees' lives and, really get them to earn a career. And it can be done. We have some terrific success stories where we take a hourly level person who, wants to become a professional technician. And just a couple of years ago, I got a picture from a technician that started with us at $8 an hour 11 years ago. And he just sent me a picture. He and his wife were moving into their brand new home that they just built. And he wanted to thank me for last year. He made $95,000.
Wow. Doesn't that give you goosebumps?
It does. It gives me goosebumps. Right. And, we like to share that story amongst the company and say, hey, we can't give it to you on a silver platter. We want to give you as many resources and tools and support you throughout that process. But here's the things that, this individual did. And he pushed himself and we paid for the training. And, he showed up in work in uniform, ready to go. He was part of the culture and he understood it wasn't just that he was going to be a mechanic. He had to be part of what makes VIP different, which is the customer engagement process. And we want to bring our customers out into the shop and let the professional technician spend a minute or 2, with the customer under the car. And customers love it because they can see the transparency and they can see that it's not some salesman at the desk who's trying to, sell them something. And and he's done a terrific job with that. And I have no doubt, his earnings are going to go considerably higher. He is a master tech today. He's studying to be a world-class technician. And we have, I think we're up to 14 world-class technicians and 65 master technicians. And, that's what it's all about. And when we have that kind of talent in our stores, our business thrives.
Well, what you said, the tire business is not a glamorous business. Somebody once asked me, like, what would you want to do if you weren't in the tire business? And I go, I come back again in another life. I want to be in the tire business.
Yeah.
First of all, it's got the best people, friends. All my friends are in the tire business. I mean, I have neighbors and stuff, but my
Sure.
friends are in the tire business, and it's all about relationships, and it's people buy from people,
Right.
and taking care of the customer like VIP Tire and Service does, and that's why you built your business on such a strong foundation.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Johnny. It's, the secret sauce, there's no silver bullets. Everybody says, oh, you must have all the headaches in the world, 700 something people working for you. Oh my God, I feel bad for you. And I'm like, no, we love it. Every
Yeah,
one of those persons is an opportunity for not only themselves, but also for the company. And if we can, line the stars, good things, great things happen.
that's right. So,
Yeah.
John, in the early 2000s, not too long after 9/11, you
Yes.
acquired 48 locations of VIP discount auto centers, and then you turned around and rebranded them to VIP Tire and Service centers. Tell us about that whole thought process and even making that kind of decision just a few weeks after 9/11, and all the rapid growth since then.
Johnny, how does a guy with 2 stores buy a company with 48 stores, huh?
Never heard of that one.
I got a lot of phone calls like that when it did hit the press. So we had been working. Actually, I was trying to buy a competitor in the retail tire space in New England. I won't mention their name, but the deal fell apart at the end. And the accountant that was representing this fellow was not the most forthright person, let's just say. And he made kind of a snarled remark to me on the way out the door. And he said, you should call Tom Ogie at VIP. And I didn't even turn around to even let him know I heard what he said. But I called my wife and I said, Sarah, we're going to go away for the weekend. And I just wasted a few $100,000 on this deal. And believe me, that was a lot of money for me back then.
Sure.
And I learned a lot about not having to do that, but I did during the process. And we had about a year and a half into that transaction. But anyways, it fell apart. Monday morning, I came back. I called my General Tire rep and I said, you know who Tom Ogie is? And he says, yeah, he owns VIP. I heard he just had a stroke. I'm like, oh, really? So I picked up the phone. I called. 2 days later, he called me back and he goes, I used to know your father from the New England Tire Dealers Association. And I said, geez, Tom, how you feeling? And he goes, I'm feeling all right. It was a pretty good big scare, but I'm going to be okay. And I said, I heard through the grapevine that you might be interested in selling your business. He said, yeah, I think it's time. And I said, oh, I'd like to come up and meet with you. And he said, come on up. And that's how it started. And it took us about a year and a half to put the capital structure together to buy his big company. And right before that happened, the dot-com bubble burst. And if you remember back then, the financial communities went into a complete tailspin.
Right.
And we had a number of banks that dropped out pretty quickly. And basically, at the end of the day, we went from 17 banks down to one. It was GE Capital who said to me, John, we love the story. You're going to do great with this company. It's kind of a sleeping giant, but you need to find a deep pocket to help you. And we're going to back out unless you can find that deep pocket. I said, well, how much of a deep pocket do you need? And they told me a number. And 2 weeks later, I had a deep pocket at the table, and it happened to be Larry Day in TBC.
Oh,
If
wonderful.
it wasn't for Larry, I would have never been able to buy VIP. And they became a minority shareholder and a 20% ownership interest, and I owned the other 80 at the time. And that's it. It took about 6 months from the dot-com bubble to 9/11 or so, 8 months, whatever it was, and we finally closed 2 weeks after 9/11. And we started to kind of restructure the company and listen to the employees. And when I bought it, VIP's model was very similar to a Pep Boys. It was VIP discount auto centers. So they had full line part stores in their retail front end of their stores. And then they had, 6 to 8 service bays off to the side. But the majority, like 80% of their revenue was auto parts. And I didn't know anything about the auto parts business, but I knew they had great locations. And I knew, and the owners told me the first time we met them, I said, well, tell me about the service business. And they said, we hate the service business. And Johnny, when I heard them say that, I couldn't have been happier. And I ran out and called my accountant and said, I don't know where we're going to come up with the money to buy this place, but this place is dying for some new leadership. And I love the service business because you know what? I don't care if it's Walmart's supply chain or any big company, they can't put us out of business. We control our own destiny in that space.
Right.
It's all about your conviction of how much you want to challenge yourself and how really good you want to get. And not that there aren't challenges in the retail environment, as good as or better than I do, Johnny. There's a ton of them, but you know what? You have to embrace them. And you can make a big difference if you involve your staff in that process and then get them to hold themselves accountable to what we all know is the right way to do this.
Sure.
And serve customers properly.
Wow, you bring up a good name. I'm sure he's smiling up in heaven there, Larry Day. And I knew Larry pretty good also. He was a former Firestone executive before he took off and did other things, and did not know that story. But and we actually, I was down to see TBC, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. We got together and had lunch one day, and it was really, really heartfelt. He's a really great guy.
Not only did Larry help me, get me over the hump and be that deep pocket that GE Capital needed, but he was a very active member of our board. They had a board seat. He came to every board meeting. He'd call me, throughout the month 2 or 3 times and ask me how things were going. And what I loved about him most, though, I can tell you a quick story. It's kind of an embarrassing story, but it really kind of tells you all about Larry Day. So I was all excited. I don't know, it's maybe the 2nd or 3rd year I'm into the whole thing. And we had a board meeting, and I came up with this new program called Inspect, Inform, and Educate. And I had all these fancy paperwork and forms and 3-part carbon paper, so that a technician could do the multi-point inspection. We could give a copy to the customer and this whole thing. And Larry's at the board meeting, and I'm making this big deal out of it. And Larry goes, Jesus, John, this is like the best thing since sliced bread. You're going to do fantastic with it. As soon as I heard him say it, I was like, oh my God, where is he going with this? And, the meeting got over, and Larry goes to me, he goes, hey, John, come on, let's go down. Let's go see a couple of the stores in the Lewiston, Auburn area and check out this Inspect, Inform, and Educate program. And he goes into a store, and I introduce him to the manager, who's great kid. He's actually a DM for us today. He says, Kurt, tell me about this Inspect, Inform, and Educate. Oh, Mr. Day, this is unbelievable. And he goes through the whole thing. And he goes, when did you start this? And he says, oh, it was like a couple of months ago. And he goes, so you have like a 30-day file that, you keep your work orders every day. And he goes, oh yeah, right over here. And Larry opens the drawer, and he picks out like 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And he starts going through the work orders, and all the MPI forms are blank. And he's like, Kurt, what's this? Oh, that guy was just in the other day. So that was a redo. So we don't do another one, a redo. And he goes to the next one, the next one, the next one. I'm behind Kurt, Larry going, shut up. And Larry just turns to me and he goes, John, it ain't worth the piece of paper you printed that on until you get everyone to buy into it. And I said, you're absolutely right, Larry.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's those kind of things happen. I've been through a lot of those in my career. Absolutely. Yeah. So John, you told me something that no other tire dealers ever told me, that you don't have keys for most of your stores. I mean, what's that all about?
Well, it's interesting. When we decided we were going to sell off the parts division of VIP, we ended up selling it on December 31st, 2012 to O'Reilly. We put a book together, and I handpicked 8 companies to come in and talk to us: AutoZone, Napa, all the names you would know. They all came in and looked at it, and AutoZone wanted to do the deal, but they only wanted like 35 at the time, our 56 stores. And I said, guys, it's all or nothing,
Right.
And I said, and then the CEO of AutoZone said to me, he goes, John, we're not going to co-brand our stores, AutoZone and VIP. I mean, you're going to have to put a separate entrance, a demising wall, separate utilities. And I said, we had that looked at, and we estimate back of the envelope, it's about $350,000 to $400,000 to do that times 56 stores. And I don't have that kind of money. And he said, well, John, unless you do that, we're walking. And I'm like, have a nice day. And basically, every one of them pretty much said the same thing to me, including O'Reilly. And I was like, well, sometimes, you got to just hang in there and see what happens. And anyways, I thought the deal was kind of done and we were going to put it on ice for a while. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from the CEO of O'Reilly and Mr. Hensley. He was with the co-president, Ted Wise, and said, hey, John, Ted and I would like to come in and see you. And I'm like, great. When would you like to come in? He said, what about this afternoon? I go, this afternoon? He goes, yeah, we've gone to all 56 of your stores in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, great, come on in. They come into my office and they sit down and he said, John, we want to do the deal. We love your stores. They're in, kind of a lot of them in our backwoods markets that O'Reilly loves that kind of, they're from Springfield, Missouri, they got, today they got over 7,000 stores everywhere, but they said, and I'm like, and we'll pay your price, your asking price. So I'm like, okay. And they said, but there's two things we want. And I'm like, okay, well, what are they? And he said, well, the first things we want is the keys to your stores. And I said, pardon me? And they said, well, we're going to be open later than you are. And most of their stores are open to 9, 10 o'clock at night. We close at 6 p.m. And we'll open whatever time, typically our stores open at 8 a.m. But if you want to open at 7, that's fine. We can open at 7. And we have our own alarm company too. So we'll take care of the alarms. You won't be charged for any alarms. And I remember just paying or signing a contract last year. We spent about $185,000 on alarm monitoring fees and everything for all 56 stores at the time. And I'm like, and I go, what is it about the keys and he goes, well, it's about the loss prevention. We want to be controlling. I go, you guys aren't going to have a problem with loss. I'm sure you're right, John, but this is one of those things that we need to have. And I kind of sit there and I'm like, you know what? I don't see how it disadvantages VIP at all. I mean, of those 56 stores, more than 80% of them I owned. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. And then I said to them, what's the second thing you want? And I'm like, I said to myself, I am going to get split in two right now. The axe is coming out. And they said, we want all 56 of your managers.
Oh,
I said, excuse me? They said, yeah, we want all 56 of your managers. And they said, John, we'll work with you through a transition period, but if you want us to pay your price, those are the two things. That's our offer. What do you think? And I said, I stood up and I said, you got a deal. And I shook their hands. And the next day I had my VP of merchandising, Tim Winkler, and my VP of store operations, Gary McCausland, come into my office. And I said, guys, I have some exciting news. Come on in. And I said, shut the door. And they're like, shut the door. I never shut my door. Right? Even probably when I should, but I'm pretty much an open book. And I said, hey, I sold the parts business to O'Reilly. And we're going to close in 30 days, the end of December 31st. And they're like, John, this is the best news I ever heard. We knew, Johnny, that we were in a business that we were going to get run over. I mean, these guys are now $15, $20 billion behemoths. But back then they were 8 to 10 billion, and they have all the supply chain systems. We were stocking 33,000 active SKUs. An average warehouse at O'Reilly's today is stocking over 650,000 SKUs. They have overnight supply chain replenishment to all stores 7 days a week. They get next day 2 million additional SKUs they can get to the store within a day and a half to 2 days. And, if you have the inventory, you get the sales. And then they also have this factoring program, which AutoZone pioneered. Tim Winkler, who is my CEO and president, was the VP of sales, what was Delco Remy, the starter and alternated division of GM. So his biggest customer was AutoZone and O'Reilly. So he was in the middle of this whole factoring program, and he knows it as good as anyone in the country. But essentially, if you want to be a starter and alternator supplier or any other major supplier, pick your part, water pumps, batteries, whatever, they basically were looking for consignment inventory. And these small manufacturers couldn't afford to do consignment inventory. So instead, AutoZone came up with this idea of this factoring program and says, listen, we'll have a bank that will, at the initial stages of it, I understand it was Sun Capital down south that put the first few deals together. we'll have them bankroll the inventory. So you ship your goods into one of our DCs and you'll get the money wired to your account within 10 days of receipt of goods. But we're not going to pay the bank back until we match the overall inventory turns of that particular category. So starters and alternators, back when we were kids, Johnny, every Chevy, Cadillac, Oldsmobile all had the same guts on it, right? You only had maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 SKUs. Today, there's 400 to 500 starters and alternators. So anyways, the category changed, changed dramatically. But essentially, if you look at one of their annual reports, their outstanding AP to inventory is approaching 500 days. So they have free frigging inventory. That's why they generate billions in free cash flow. And that's why they're growing so much. And so anyways, we were fortunate, extremely fortunate that we sold the parts division when we did. We made a little bit of money on it, but most important, we got out of a business we were literally going to get run over. O'Reilly's was in 39 states at the time. They were coming to New England. AutoZone was already there. Of course, Napa was there for years. And I got out of a business that I potentially could have put me under. And now we could focus all our energies on the tire and service business, which I knew all came down to really one thing. You hire and train the best people and get them to understand the customer interface is critical, and it's a core part of their job, not just being a technician. And that's what we've tried to do since then. And so we had to completely rebuild the leadership staff at every store. I think the first year we hired over 200 managers to finally get the 56 that we could run the ball and, go to the playoffs with. And, over time, some of those didn't make it. But you know what? Looking back on it, we can laugh about it today. It was the best thing we did by far.
Oh, yeah. Well, Tim was so kind after our business meeting we had. Tim was so kind to take me around to several of your stores. And you have to, for the tire dealers that are listening to this, you have to envision this. When you walk through the doors, you see the O'Reillys on this half of the showroom floor. And on this half over here, you've got a sales counter. You got some tires up on the walls, and you got a door leading out to the bays and everything.
And we got a big window looking out into the shop.
Yeah, big window looking out to the shop. And when they sell a brake job or something, they just put down in their computer what parts they need, and the guy over in O'Reilly's delivers it to the counter, and there you go. It's a unique setup. I think it's phenomenal for you, and obviously it's worked. It's been 12 years since you did that?
Yeah, it's been 11 years. Yeah,
11 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the interesting things, Johnny, is that kind of happened by itself. So when we did the deal, O'Reilly sent out 200 people. We call it the O'Reilly Tsunami. Their whole store setup crew, and they came in and changed all the gondolas, all the signage, relayed out the back room for their whole planograms in their back room, right? And they did it in all 56 floors in 2 weeks, right? It was chaotic, but we basically had to take a chainsaw to the counter, and we used to have a 40-foot counter, for everything, parts and tires and service, and we moved about 20 feet of it over into our little area. And one of the first stores we were doing it, Tim and I went out and did it, and we measured everything off. And one of our managers who worked at a car dealership for years said, "Hey, what are you guys doing? What's that red line?" We're like, "Robbie's cutting that counter over there, and this is where your counter is going to be. And when this whole thing happens in 2 weeks, when O'Reilly shows up, this is going to be your area. Here's your tire wall. Here's your customer waiting chairs. Of course, we have the shop, and we still have our tire back room." And he looks at the counter, and then he looks at the customer waiting chairs that were literally 10, 15 feet away. He goes, "You can't put the counter here." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Customers are going to be able to listen to every word I say." And there were things we say in this business that customers can't listen to. And I said, "Michael, congratulations. You're now VP of marketing for VIP in Arundel, Maine. Good luck." And you know what? That was talk about being transparent. It was the best thing that ever happened to us, because it literally, they were forced to be, on guard and be professional throughout the day. The customers listen to every phone call. They see how you interact with O'Reilly. They see how you interact with your colleagues. And it's actually, we get more emails and compliments about how great our crew is and how they see them working together.
That's a great story.
You go into most car dealerships and the waiting room is at the other end of the building,
Yeah.
right? You see these big stickers, no customers allowed in the shop, right?
Yeah.
We love seeing those things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, John, we first met in the fall of 2016 when you picked up the phone and called me about the analytics being done by GFK on their tire and service panel. So I remember it was like November or something, and I go, "Where are you at?" You go, "Lewiston, Maine." I go, "Well, heck, I better get my butt up there before it starts snowing." So Neil Portnoy, who was managing director at the time, and Tim Winkler, we got together and broke some bread, had a meeting. We signed up you up for the panel. How's Tim doing today? And as you said, he's now CEO running the whole show, huh?
Yeah, he's been in that role now for about 4.5 years. It's been terrific. Tim is, I'm very fortunate to have him. He's a great people person. He's competitive. He wants to win, but he's very fair. He'll listen. He'll take everybody's viewpoint in, and he works, extremely hard. He loves what he does. He loves helping others. His whole mission in his life is to help others, and he, views this role as being a platform for him to do that. And he's on the phone with our store managers in the evening if somebody's having a hard time. Could be a personal issue, could be a financial issue, and we have all kinds of resources that we try to do to help our folks. And it's just I'm very fortunate to have him. He right now is actually in Hungary with Redestein Tire along with my son-in-law, and they're going over. I think they're in Budapest tonight, and they're having dinner there, and they're seeing two of Redestein's factories. And he also, was behind the whole data market intelligence data, because he was exposed to that in the parts business in a big way.
Right.
Because all those big retailers and even Walmart back in the day used to share their sell-through data so that they could understand, where their market shifts are, what their market share was and stuff like that. The NPD data we were involved with back then. And so initially the data was a little bit rough, Johnny, but I can say, boy, in the last year and a half or so, it's made a huge improvement. And we study that very much now, and it points out areas of opportunities for our company to focus in on. And, we find it extremely useful and valuable data.
No, Neil and the boys, Matt and Miguel, have done an unbelievable job. As an executive for a major rubber company, I think at the time, 44 million tires of responsibility. Okay.
Wow.
But on any given day, I'd have anywhere from 1.5 million to 2 million tires on back order. That's not a good thing, because when we would ship Ford tires for Bridgestone dealers to BIP, we had no idea whether they went on a car at 2:00 that afternoon or sat in one of your warehouses for 6 months. So to have more rapid information as to what's moving so that we can now help the manufacturers, all of them, Michelin, Goodyear, Bridgestone, Yokohama, Hankook, whoever, give them more insight, and then turn around and give the retailers more insight to what are the popular sizes out there right now, what's the average retail selling price, all those analytics. It's the same thing from the movie Moneyball. The more analytics you have, the better you're going to run your business.
And the better use of capital you can have, and making that investment in the right areas. And that's where we see the biggest initial win for us.
Yeah, great. So you've got now 70 locations. What's your plans for future growth?
Well, we don't have any aspirations to try and run to get to 100 stores or anything like that. We're as long as we continue to earn our stripes, we're going to continue to open 3, 4, maybe 5 stores a year is kind of the run rate we're on. We just opened our first store in Connecticut. There's 2 other locations there that we hope to close on very shortly. And eventually, we could see having, a dozen or more stores in the next few years down that way. We are looking in Rhode Island as well to open up some retail stores and fill out parts of southeastern Massachusetts and western Massachusetts. We're pretty saturated in Maine with 35 stores. And we see in New Hampshire opening a second store in 4 markets, Concord, Manchester. We're not in the Salem area because the real estate's so extremely expensive there, but we're always got our eyes and ears on, open to see any opportunity. And this inflation has made it extremely difficult to, we were really kind of hoping, believe it or not, for a downturn because the real estate expectations that a lot of these commercial owners have had has been crazy. And the prices that they're getting, I think some people are just opening locations just to say they open locations, and I'm never going to do that. We have a formula that works. We're going to be disciplined to that formula, and if we have to wait till the market turns or rather than owning and look to lease stores, we'll do that. But out of the 70 stores we operate today, we own all but 13 of them. So, and we have options to purchase on 4 of those. So we like owning the real estate. It lets us control our own destiny when it comes to making any repairs or additions or any updates to the property. We just this year hired 9 people to be on our own construction crew. So we have 3 crews of 3, one up in northern Maine, one in Manchester, New Hampshire, one in Massachusetts, so that we can update and remodel all our stores. We've already done 14 of them, but our goal is to remodel. There's about 45 of the stores that needed to be remodeled. So by the end of this year, we'll be through half of it or so.
That's great. So you'll get them all done before the 100th anniversary of that.
We will.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what do you feel, John, is the biggest challenge facing tire dealers today?
I think the biggest challenge is looking yourself in the mirror, frankly, and having your eye on the right set of opportunities in your business. And for us, it's all about the people. And, am I doing everything I can as the owner of the company to give the tools and the investment so that we can develop people to be, future leaders for VIP and inspire young adults who are dying to have a career and have a fruitful life so they can raise a family. And if we can get that equation even halfway right, generally good things happen. And when we get it all the way right, fantastic things happen. So I think that's, it's so easy to say, oh God, unemployment's at 3.5%. This new generation doesn't want to work. They all want to be working from home and 3-4 day week works and all this other junk you hear. And, some of that may be true, but you can talk yourself into a lot of really bad areas. And from my perspective, we're like, you know what? It's very challenging, but that means we're going to have to work a little bit harder. And we get people on board. They can see that we do invest, we think, a lot stronger than most of our competitors. And you can talk to any one of our employees. Every employee in the company has my cell phone. We have a complete open book. And we spend a lot of time shoulder to shoulder with our people in the field and ask them for their input. And at the same point, we ask them to come up with a game plan. So when they stamp it, it's their plan. I'm counting on you to implement it. And I understand you're going to have some trips and falls. That's what we all do. Nobody's perfect. But you know what? You've got to believe in this plan. And even though it's going to be hard to execute, if you can get the rest of your team to buy into it, you need teamwork in this retail environment to have a very profitable store.
Well, it's a lot easier to get to the end goal when they're giving you ideas and they're putting their own buy-in into the whole process. Right. So congratulations on that.
There's no marketing program. People are, I know there's other people that spend a lot of money on TV and they get the phone to ring, and that's okay. Our phone's ringing off the hook right now. What happens next?
Yeah.
Is the most important thing. And so we're very fortunate to be involved in an industry that we're not worrying about where the next phone call is coming from or where the next vehicle is coming from. The only thing we worry about is, are we doing everything to earn that customer's business for life? So when you don't spend that extra few minutes at the checkout and go over what we actually did, if you don't bring them out to the shop and let them meet the technician and find out what's really going on with the car, if you bring them out, even when there's nothing wrong, that's the best thing you could ever do in this business, because we're in the trust business. And, people, I understand why they have their guard up. Our industry over the years, maybe has had a bad reputation where some bad players have done some really unethical things. And, that's why we have those big windows in our shops. And that's why we want to bring every customer out into the shop. And, that's why we have to keep our bays clean. We have to be in uniform, and we have to go out of our way to make the customers feel comfortable in that environment.
You've done it right. And everything you just said, I relate to. I've got some doctor appointments coming up. Same thing. I want that personal touch from my doctor. It's important for me. I don't want to be doing a Zoom call or doing something else. I want to touch and feel and understand what's going on with my body, just like my car. So it's the same thing.
Exactly. So you know what? You don't have to be the smartest guy in the world, but if your conviction to that formula that we just talked about, that you're well aware of, Johnny, is something you get out of bed every day and look at, and that's the first thing you think of, you're going to do very well in this business. And that's, I think, my number one job is to try and inspire as many people as possible to look through that prism and say they really are in control. They can do a lot to affect the outcome of the score of the game, and whether or not that customer is going to come back, and the lifetime value of that customer is enormous.
All right, we're going to wrap this up with rapid fire. This is something new that I started to do in my podcast. I'm just going to shoot you a couple of statements. Just tell me the first thing that comes off your mind, all right?
All right.
So if you're driving a vehicle, stick shift or automatic?
Automatic.
On track or off-road racing?
On track.
What position did you play in hockey when you were a kid?
I was a centerman.
See, I was a goalie, and back in those days, in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have a lot of money. So I would take the Chicago Tribune. It was a real thick newspaper, and I would duct tape them to my knees so that when guys like you would shoot pucks at me, they would go off on my newspapers. But I had a lot of bruises.
I grew up in the Bobby Orr era in Boston. So there were hockey rinks going up left and right when I was a kid. So I played hockey year round for, almost 20 years. And it was just, and back then, Phil Esposito was the scoring leader of the NHL. So you know how big and slow Phil was. So I wouldn't have a chance of making the team today, Johnny. These kids are so much faster and so strong. But hockey in Boston, when I was growing up in the, I was born in 58, so I played hockey in the 60s and 70s, played at Northeastern for 3 years, Division One, and it was just fabulous. I loved it. And again, my dad and mom didn't miss a game.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing both. We got Phil there towards the end of his career in Chicago, and we also got Bobby Orr there. I
know.
Thank you for that. Those are great guys.
Yeah.
So morning bird or night owl?
Morning bird for sure.
Favorite Motown artist?
Junior Walker.
Okay, Junior Walker. I love it. And your favorite seafood joint in Maine?
We get it right off the dock, right in front of my house, Johnny.
I love it. Well, when you send me an invite for the 200 or for the 100th anniversary, I'll come up and bring the wife, and maybe we'll have some lobster right off your deck.
Yeah. And there is a fabulous fish restaurant in Portland called Scales that I'd be happy to take you to, and we'll do both.
All right, great. Well, listen, John, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for being on Johnny G and Friends. You be safe out there, my friend, and keep selling all those tires and doing all that great stuff with all those customers.
All right, Johnny. Well, thanks so much. Keep in touch, and if you hear anything out there in the industry you think would be good for VIP, please let me know.
You got it, buddy. Take care.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
You don't need magic to disappear for a while, because Firestone tires were built for ticking off mile markers. Firestone Destination LE3 tires for 70,000 miles of exploring. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.